kindness is not weakness. And today I'm here with Elliott Reid from Revitalise Clinic.
Pleasure.
Elliott, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited about this one.
My pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about Revitalise and yourself. How do you help people? What do you do?
Yeah, so Revitalise is a clinic which I founded in 2013. We've helped over 8,000 people become pain-free, mentally well and physically fit. And the whole premise is that we take on the most advanced specialists that we can, and we work holistically to help patients and clients to achieve their goals, whether that is to feel fitter, to be mentally better, mentally more well, or to get out of pain. These common symptoms that we see are anything from sciatica, nerve impingement, disc herniations, to depression, anxiety, to psoriasis, eczema, to obviously people being too heavy for what they like, or too light for what they like, or not looking how they want to look. So it's amazing. We get to see a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and we have a good time helping them as best as we can.
Why did you go into this? What motivated you?
So I've always been interested in health. I think that everyone's got their thing which they're interested in, and things which they want to understand or pick apart. So, for example, when you're younger, some kids like to pull apart bikes and mechanical cars and put it back together again. For me, it was the human body. So I really wanted to understand.
You pulled it apart and...
Well, not quite. But I really wanted to understand why certain people are stronger or quicker, why they think differently, what has led to that, how do you change it if it's not going so well. And that's probably partly because I had a sister who was far more naturally athletic than I was, so I wanted to catch up. But at the same time, my heroes were the likes of Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali, so people who were philosophically and cognitively extremely sound, but also physically just amazing specimens of human beings. So that's why I've always been interested. But then, as well as that, I was boxing, and when I was 17, I suffered from a back injury, and my mum took me to see an osteopath, and the osteopath helped me get fit for a fight by that weekend. And I could kind of understand what he was doing, how he was thinking. I wanted to pursue that further. But then, so that was the idea about me studying to be an osteopath. But the reason why Revitalise is so holistic is when I was 17, I had a couple of friends die from cancer. One was 17 and one was 19 when I was a bit older. And it just made me realize that our time on this planet could end at any moment. And I see so many people on a day-to-day basis who are so inhibited. They're inhibited because they're not fit for life, because they're mentally, they can't do what they want to do. They've fallen victim to their defense mechanisms, as we do when we're suffering from mental illness. And I just thought that to go through life with a metaphorical ball and chain on your ankle, you're not going to get as far, and not going to be able to do as many things as you could do without it. So the motivation was to help people achieve what they wanted to achieve from life without their anxieties, without their pain, without their mental illness, or without their medical predispositions. And that's where Revitalise really came to light as it is at the moment.
So what this episode is really about, what I wanted to delve into a little bit, is the relationship between your mental health and your physical health. And I've suffered for a long time from depression. And I know that if I don't keep active and things like that, it's definitely a lot worse. So what is the relationship between maintaining your physical health and the effect that that's going to have on your mental health?
Yes, the best way I can explain this is to throw a question back at you and ask you, what is the difference between a river, an estuary, or a tributary?
I don't know.
Not much. Water still flows through all of them. The reason why we give them different names is because it helps us to categorize exactly what they are, how they function, right? It's got nothing to do with the nature of water. It's got nothing to do with the nature of that river or its estuaries or tributaries. It's just how we understand it. And it's the same thing with health. When it comes to mental health, physical health, there's no real distinguishing, you can't compartmentalize them. I'll give you an example. So one of the leading causes of physical pain in the UK is depression. So there, once again, we've got a blurred line between physical pain and mental pain. And then are they any different? Because when it comes to physical pain, you feel that in your brain anyway, or your brain is what tells you that you're in physical pain anyway. So the easiest way to understand how we perceive things as human beings is to imagine that you are in a house, say it's a big house, with 5 small windows representing our special senses, and we have to make sense of the world based on what's happening through those windows. Now, one window could show us that it's raining outside and it's miserable, and another window could show that it's actually quite bright outside, or that there's actually some quite nice plants growing, or something like that. One window might enable sound to come through, which is threatening, and another window might enable sound to come through, which is actually quite pleasant. Now, what we have in the middle of that is the perception of the individual which is in the house. That's one thing. So how was that individual perceiving the world to be? Someone who is in pain and has been in pain for a long time will perceive the world as far more threatening than someone who isn't in pain. For example, they did a study where they took, say, 100 individuals and they put them all on the top of a steep hill. Now, they asked them how steep the hill was, but 50 of them were standing on a skateboard. The 50 who were standing on a skateboard over-exaggerated how steep the hill was. Same hill, very different perception. So I hope that gives some light as to how, shed some light on how that our perception is the most important thing. And it's the interaction between our perception and our capacity, which is also a very important thing. So for example, if I am in pain, but I'm used to exposing myself to, say, controlled trauma. So for example, exercise, walking, whether that is running or weightlifting, my perception of pain is going to be far healthier than someone who is very sedentary. And that's backed up by research. Same thing with if I have exposed myself to, historically, to controlled doses of emotional trauma. So for example, winning or losing. I come from a boxing background, having to control my anxieties or control my doubts and get up on stage and perform in front of 300 people with someone who wants to punch my face in. That exposes me to a certain amount of emotional trauma. It teaches me certain lessons. The emphasis needs to be on making sure that it is scaled for the individual, that the individual is not stepping so far out of their comfort zone, because if you bend a little bit, you can strengthen. If you break, then it's going to take a little bit of time to come back from that.
Right. So essentially, are we talking about building up resilience? So mental resilience, physical resilience. So someone who is a high-level athlete, like a marathon runner or professional sports person, who's obviously done a lot of physical training, would you say that they would be more mentally resilient as well to emotional traumas?
I don't think we can cast a blanket on something like that. And the only reason why is so many influencing factors, right? So, for example, is sport going to save someone who's gone through years of child abuse and has seen countless amounts of trauma? Might help in the context of that individual, but I don't think you can blanket say that someone who has undergone sport or exercise is now able to deal with anything that life throws at them. When it comes to resilience, mental resilience, health helps. The fitter the individual, the better their nutrition, the better their diet, the better they sleep, it all helps. However, we have to also look once again at that metaphorical person in the house. What have they gone through? What have they experienced? What is their philosophy? These are all very, very important factors when it comes to how we can build mental resilience. And also, we need to look at the individual themselves, because we are fantastically diverse as a species. Some people are completely hard-headed. Some people are more emotionally susceptible to the peaks and troughs of life. It takes all kinds to make the world go round. And I think that accepting that we're very diverse and accepting that we all have very individual reactions to the world is a very healthy thing to do. Because if I just blanket say that you're not resilient because you don't exercise or you don't eat the right foods, I'm not just harming that individual, because I'm harming myself, because that individual as a community, in a community, could massively contribute to society. They could, whether it's their perception or whatever they bring in terms of skill set or knowledge or philosophy, they can massively benefit society. And I think we need to view people in their individualism as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so much about what this project is about, is not making blanket generalizations about people. So because someone is overweight, there must be XYZ, or because someone is a person of color, there must be XYZ, because someone is transgender, there must be, that's really like at the core of what I want to do, is like tell people stories.
And the best way to get around that is to have a conversation. And so there's one thing I often ask people when it comes to generalizations they make about other people, right? And let's be honest, a lot of the generalizations that we hear are quite negative. It doesn't seem that
always. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So one question I always ask is your perception down to your personal experience, or is it something that you've read about or seen? Most of the time, it's something that they've read about or seen. So they're extrapolating information and applying it to their life, when really their life and their lived experience should be their most reliable thing when it comes to the question of whether or not you should feel threatened by someone or something.
Yeah. I think we all have these little tags on us, as soon as someone hears my accent, okay, I'm tagged as immigrant, South African, they've already tagged me as, young white female. You get these labels on you.
Right.
And people make assumptions based on those labels.
Yep.
But how can every single person under that label have the same attributes? It's impossible.
It's impossible, and it's a bit silly as well.
Yeah,
right? It's a bit silly.
It is.
But I think that once again, that's where philosophy comes into it, because as if someone has a healthily critical philosophy, and what I mean by that is they can critique their own mind, then they can consistently provide feedback. I thought this person was going to be like that, but they're not. Therefore, my previous theory must have been wrong. I'm going to look into this a bit further. That type of thinking can go a long way. But the only issue with that is that you have to be healthy, you have to be quite comfortable with changing your belief systems. And a lot of people aren't. So I have many beliefs, which I hope or I try to found on evidence. But if I had contrary evidence, I'd be very comfortable with changing that. It's not a problem.
Right. I think that is what the next generation needs. I think we need to question our fundamental beliefs. And to me, that is like the definition of self-awareness and intellectual thinking, is questioning the beliefs of yourself and society. And if I believe that the sky is purple, but somebody comes to me and shows me critical evidence that's indisputable that it's blue, I need to not stand outside and picket and yell about people that say it's blue. I need to say, you know what, actually, I've believed for 34 years that it was purple. Maybe I need to rethink this. Maybe this person is right.
I agree.
And why have I always believed it was purple? Who told me that? And why have I been so convinced of it my whole life?
Yeah.
I think just thinking like that is just going to open up so many doors for compassion, understanding, collaboration,
I think you tend to find that the reason why people do that is because their ego is emotionally linked to a fact or to an outcome. So like a common one, unfortunately, which we saw during Brexit, is the labeling of immigrants, i.e. I might not have much going for me at all, but as long as I'm not an immigrant, I'm somebody, right? Which is the kind of rhetoric that we saw leading up to Brexit. It's also something that Martin Luther King spoke about. He said that one of the greatest farces of American society is that you're taught that as long as you're not a Negro or a black person, but they used to go so-called Negro, as long as you're not a so-called Negro, you are somebody. And a lot of what he spoke about was trying to embed a feeling of somebodyness in the African American society. It's been in discussion for a long time. You also see something called schismogenesis. Schismogenesis is a sociological phenomena where someone doesn't identify themselves as what they are, they identify themselves as who they're not. So I will throw out this comparison. So Jamaicans, so my family are Jamaican. Jamaicans have a very, very strong sense of what it is to be Jamaican and what it means to be Jamaican, whether it is your philosophy, your culture, your food, your attitude, especially your attitude to competing in life. There's a very, very strong Jamaican cultural trend in that, right? Of being happy to go against the odds. Now, if I contrast that to Britishness, if you were to ask a British person what makes you British, and this is something that author of The Lion and the Unicorn, I can't remember what his name is, it's something that he spoke about. George, is it Oswell? Oswell, I think. So he spoke about this, that British culture tends to be not very tangible. It's not something that you can pick up and wrestle with. There's no distinct cuisine. There's no distinct type of music. There's no distinctive dance or things like that, but you can still feel it. And I agree. I think that there is a sense of Britishness and there is a sense of British culture, and especially when it comes to manners or having a somewhat, let's use word, so a lot of the time quite an offensive worldview, but also a lot of the time quite a healthy worldview, which has obviously been inherited as being part of one of the largest empires that's ever existed. However, a lot of British people define themselves by what they're not rather than who they are. So, for example, we can't let these Syrians and Iraqis and Afghanistanis come in here. We can't let that happen. We're not immigrants. They offer different cultures and things like that than we do. Yeah, Britain will open up their arms. A lot of British people open up their arms to Ukrainian refugees. Why is that? So that's an interesting dichotomy as what happens in
the other, I guess.
The other, unless they are close enough to you. And I think that is the idea of what does it mean to be quintessentially English. And it seems that the closer you get to quintessentially English, the more, say, comfortable a lot of British
tolerable people. Yeah.
Tolerable, yeah, which is in its sense a bit of a weird one. Because if I said I'm tolerating you right now, that's not a compliment. You know what I mean?
No. Okay, so what advice do you have for somebody today who's struggling with mental health and physical health? They want to make improvements, they want to get better, but they just don't know where to begin. What are some small steps that somebody could take today, now?
So tend to find that if someone can seize power or seize control, that's a very good thing. So I'll go for the low-hanging fruit first. The low-hanging fruit tends to be what your mum told you growing up. Are you going to sleep early enough? Are you eating your fruits and vegetables? Why don't you get outside? These things, right? I'm not saying that it's going to fix everything. I'm saying that with a little bit of control and a little bit of taking up these low-hanging fruit, you might be in a better mental state as a result. So after we've got this, we need to focus on primarily the things that we can control before the things that we find harder to control or can't control. If you're in an abusive relationship, it's very difficult to control, especially if there's children involved or a mortgage or if there's financial difficulties. If you're financially hard up, it's very, very difficult to control that. But there are certain things that we might be able to do, whether it is read on CBT, read on different techniques that you can use, read about philosophy, take it in via YouTube, write a journal, ways that you can start to refine how you process things so you can refine your perception. If you can refine your perception, goes back to the metaphor of the man in the house, you can start to choose which windows you look out of and which windows you say, I understand what's going on there, but I'm not going to concern myself with it. But I have to be honest, talking about this, I do feel a heavy sense of, what would be the word, like futility. I feel like it's a bit futile. And the only reason why I say that is there are so many British people, and no, in fact, there's so many people around the world, but let's talk about British people for now, who are in the next 6 months to a year are going to go through the most financial difficulty they've potentially ever experienced. And that is stressful. That's something that I don't know if you can outthink very easily. I don't know if there's something that you can out-train your mind very easily. Yeah. So the only reason why I bring that to light, and I'm trying to shed light on that, is that I'm focusing on doing the best possible, not on fixing everything.
Yes, of course. But just some minor steps towards, self-care. Just be aware of what your basic needs are. If you're
Yep.
not sleeping enough and you're not eating properly and you're not going outside a little bit, you're going to feel bad, whether you have mental illness or not.
Yeah, yeah. And I think drawing attention to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if people just search
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you go through each ladder of that pyramid critically and just ask yourself, do I have control here? Could I improve it? And is my attempt to improve it going to be is it going to get a bang for the buck? So like, for example, not going on your phone before bed, probably not going to miss out on much, but you probably feel a lot better the next day. Eating healthy food, a lot of the time it's cheaper anyway. If you spend your time to prep, you'll do better for it. Kind of things like that.
Okay. Final question. My favorite question. I love asking people this. Recommend us a book. Recommend a book that is going to have an impact on people and that is going to make people think a little bit differently, a little outside of the box.
Oh, no
pressure. Change our lives.
My favorite, and this is my personal perspective, right? My favorite is The Denial of Death. So The Denial of Death is a book which is written by, I think, is an anthropologist. And his name doesn't come to mind, but it's called The Denial of Death. And it's basically about how all of our defense mechanisms we've inherited throughout evolution without consciousness. So when you look at, for example, a dog or a wolf, they will experience anger, happiness, grief, jealousy, but they won't see it. They'll be it. That's their instincts. That's what we call their instincts.
Right.
The difference is that we as human beings, we have inherited consciousness, which now enables us to see all those things happening. Now, that has a huge gift, but it also has a huge burden to carry, which is why when we look at, for example, a lot of religious textbooks, it's about overcoming the primitive traits that we've inherited, right? Now, the reason why I think it's good is because all of these defense mechanisms that we've inherited are to keep us primitively or prehistorically, to keep us alive.
Yeah.
If we can overcome them, and if we can accept death, and if we can become quite comfortable with death, then it means that we can get closer to eradicating those defense mechanisms. Because when you're dead, you don't really need anything to protect you anymore, which is then links to, say, Christian philosophy, Sikh philosophy, and Stoic philosophy, which is this idea of if you can conquer death, and if you can get comfortable with death, just like Jesus died and was risen 3 days after, you transform as an individual. So I think when it comes to religious textbooks, it's written a bit more metaphorically. And then when it comes to philosophical books, it's written a bit more literally. But yeah, I'd say The Denial of Death for me was just a grenade going off every sentence. It was amazing.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm definitely going to order it on Amazon today. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a great conversation, and I'm sure I'm going to have you as a guest again later on in the series.
I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Your support helps me work towards positive change. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.